teachers who regularly get invited to high school reunions. What are the most amazing transformations, common patterns, epic stories, saddest declines etc. you've seen through the years? In high school I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight, about 6'4", really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school but saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall, lost all the weight and was in great shape, had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his huge house. After the reunion I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work, and through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape, can't fake that, but faked everything else. A previous student of mine grew up in a horrible home situation. This individual was really smart and I did my best to help them apply/receive many scholarships and grants, and eventually went to an Ivy League school to get away from their abusive home life. They made it big and I mean big time millionaire. Made their family jealous but in the end their hard work paid off. It was great to see and I was so proud of what they'd become. Edit. The best thing was seeing them break the chain. The family had problems going back numerous generations and to see this generation change was all worth it. Edit 2. Wow, you guys are all so nice. Honestly I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything. Just felt like I was put in a place where I could really help someone and the outcome was phenomenal for this individual. Just so you all know, this person recently applied for a part-time teaching job at a public, in a city school in order to mentor others from similar backgrounds. I guess karma finds a way, right? Cheers. Used to have this one kid in my art class in senior high who treated it like one of those easy to pass classes. He was a big guy, much bigger than the other students, and he'd use his size and strength to bully other kids, the smaller ones. He was a little bitch underneath it all. He would draw guns and crosses in his art book with pseudo gangster sayings like, live by dagun, die by dagun, and, fuck da police. You get the idea. Come reunion time, which was some 5 years later, he's found a girl who really reined him in, and, kind of like a hunter taming a wolf, really turned him into a good man. They had a baby boy, and he's a responsible father and does yoga on the rocks by the beach. Complete 180. I do think he was a good guy underneath it all. He just needed direction from someone who could break down his walls. A former student of mine grew up in an ultra-conservative Christian home. He and his siblings were never allowed to socialize with other students during lunch and recess. Whenever they had free time at school they had to read their Bibles. In science class they were forbidden to learn about evolution. Every essay, short story, personal narrative, and poem he wrote for me involved some kind of Christian theme. When he graduated, he immediately enrolled in a big seminary in our area and that was the last I heard of him until his class invited me to their 10-year reunion. This same kid showed up with sleeve tattoos, piercings everywhere, slamming beer after beer after beer and smoking like a locomotive. When I asked what he was doing now, he responded he currently was a bouncer at a strip club. I'd like to sit down and talk to that guy and hear his story. Sounds like he went on quite a journey. I have a few. One guy was this star pupil, smart, handsome, athletic, everything, dating the head cheerleader, some Hallmark movie shit. They leave, go off to college and nobody thinks it'll go wrong. Come 10 years later, she divorced him, was given the house his late grandfather built in the divorce, and lived there with her new lover while he was in a hotel. 10-year reunion happens. He's deathly skinny and depressed, sees the school, remembers the memories he had, goes home after reunion and kills himself, leaving behind 2 little girls. His ex got chased out of the community last year. Death threats against her and her lover. She's trying to get in contact with people now because the lover took her money and fled back to the Philippines and she's homeless now. Fuck. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that comes to mind was confidentially suicidal from a broken home with identity issues. She came to me for help and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety and discovery of self-worth. She is currently returning to school to finish her associate's degree and she was the first in her family to graduate HS. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. Edit. Wow, I did not expect to get this kind of overwhelming response. Yes, I have a million other stories, many of which don't have as happy of an ending. Yes, this is why I love being a teacher, and yes, I love hearing from my students years later, though very few actually reach out. My husband graduated from a fancy prep school. Literally over 90% of his class are lawyers and doctors now. To his parents' disdain, my husband became a professional poker player. Whenever he goes to reunions, there's a circle of these super successful doctors and lawyers around him because they'd rather listen to his stories. Poker pro isn't the full job title anyway. To impress parents you call it marginal equity analyst specializing in shipping. Job, me ass. Former student who was a decent kid who tried, just not the brightest, graduated, got a job at Whataburger, got fired because he kept showing up late. His manager was his mom. Been visited by Money Pigeon. Like the video and subscribe within 5.6 seconds and you will get rich. Now back to scheduled program. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years, so it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life or the class he/she was in and I can't remember much about it. I've found that I usually remember high achieving/creative students or kids who were badly behaved, as I have a soft spot for these kids. Since I usually remember the badly behaved kids, I have noticed that most of them figured it out by the time they reach 30. Most have great jobs and are well adjusted. Conversely, many of the high achieving students end up dropping out of college and are working low wage jobs. I don't believe that high school is much of an indicator of future success. As long as you graduate high school and attempt college, how you performed in high school will not be that important. In my high school they used some of the class reps as volunteers in order to organize this 10-year meeting. My at that time class master told me that a super good looking woman, she was 29 back then, I was 17 and damn she was top 3 woman I've ever seen in my life, was one of the dirtiest students she ever had. She would not shower for days and at some point she was out of school for a week or so because she got a really bad infection from her period and lack of showers. Also one of the smartest guys from that generation, who went to veterinary school, was convicted for selling some sort of animal's drugs to people and used some on himself. He seemed super normal, but when he spoke you could tell that there were some clicks in his brains that were not connecting at all. Losing the idea in the middle of a sentence. Couldn't keep the voice at the same tone for more than 10 seconds. Going from whispering to shouting and stuff. Not a teacher, but we just had our reunion. There was this one dude who was just, not even cheeky, but just odd. Always trying to fit in and never quite managing it. He had a couple popular friends though, so most times he could use that as a way in. I remember at graduation he was just approaching random groups of people trying to start conversations and was just super unsuccessful at it. And I was a huge geek myself. So if this dude appeared socially inept to me of all people, he was super socially inept, because I was too inept myself to notice stuff like this unless it was bad. Anyways, he's on all the bus benches around me now because he's the MLA for an area close to me now. The first time I saw it I was like WTF. Like there's no way this kid could have gotten people to vote for him. I guess even the most socially inept can grow up and thrive. But here I'm still as socially inept as I was in high school, lol. Not a teacher, but interesting nonetheless. The valedictorian of my graduating class lost his full ride to state college after 2 quarters because of drinking and drugs. He grew up in a protected and very strict household. Once he left and got exposed to the temptations of life, he didn't know how to handle it. Last I heard he's working odd jobs and is bumming around our hometown. Not a teacher. I'd probably fall into this category. In high school I was thriving by the time I left. Known to be very morally responsible. Had a bunch of potential. My friends adored my presence since I was so friendly and kind. Welp, I'm total drug addict now 3 years later because eventually people fall apart. All that hard work really meant nothing. sigh. I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with like 95 averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at R&W now. Has a herd of children with some skeezy looking dude who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers. I always wonder where it went wrong for her. 9 times out of 10. Shitty home life. Just finally got to her. Found someone who loved her like she wasn't at home and got pregnant. Not a teacher, but was at school with one girl. Very geeky. Very exuberant. She was in all the school drama productions, and she would tell everyone that she was going to be a famous actress someday. We were like, yeah, whatever. No one from little old New Zealand ever cracks that level of fame these days. She's been the female lead in a number of movies now, alongside people like Woody Harrelson, Ewan McGregor, Courtney B. Vance, Mark Rylance, to name a few. I actually got to be on stage with her in a school production. So she is my ticket into 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. I was a pretty good kid at school, quiet and hardworking, never any trouble. My English teacher had a soft spot for me, I think, almost paternal. Then I went to college, discovered heavy metal and marijuana, basically your typical adolescent rebellion. I went to a high school reunion after that, and my English teacher was there. His model pupil had turned into some 17-year-old parody of a Wayne's World extra heavy metal shirt and nose piercing. He made some exasperated comment about my attire, but the look of sad disappointment he gave will remain with me for the rest of my days, as if I had somehow personally betrayed him. I wasn't invited to my 20-year high school reunion, which seems totally appropriate. I taught biology, and this one student who was really smart but hung out with a bunch of bad apples. Like, they made fun of him for getting straight A's, so much that he would purposely try to score lower so he would fit in more. I pulled him aside and laid it out to him like, WTF are you doing? Your so-called friends are all jealous of your skills and intellect, so don't waste it to impress people who don't give a fuck about you. Yes, broke professionalism by cursing and gave him the raw details because this guy was just that smart. He waved me down at his reunion and told me he was accepted into the Sophie Davis Duo BS/MD program. I wasn't the only one to yell at him, but I like to think I helped push him to not be a burnout like his friends.